Typically the tone of our meetings are candid, blunt, businesslike, and this one was no different. We had a range of issues that we had to discuss, but the two most important were, as has been reported, discussions that have been taking place between Secretary Kerry and Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, about ways in which we can institute a meaningful, serious, verifiable cessation of hostilities in Syria, and our capacity to provide some humanitarian relief to families, children, women who are suffering enormously under the burdens of that war. As you'll recall, we had initiated a cessation of hostilities a while back. Initially, it did lessen some of the violence, and then slowly it unwound. And we're back into a situation in which Assad's regime is bombing with impunity. That, in turn, we think is actually strengthening the capacity of Nusra to recruit people who might not have initially been sympathetic to terrorism, but now view anyone who's fighting against Assad as legitimized. And that is a very dangerous dynamic. And so we have had some productive conversations about what a real cessation of hostilities would look like that would allow us both, the United States and Russia, to focus our attention on common enemies like ISIL and Nusra. But given the gaps of trust that exist, that's a tough negotiation. And we haven't yet closed the gaps in a way where we think it would actually work. But my instructions to Secretary Kerry and Mr. Putin's instructions to Mr. Lavrov was to keep working at it over the next several days, because the faster we can provide some relief to folks on the ground, the better off we're going to be. And that then is a predicate for us to be able to transition into a serious conversation about a political solution to this problem that would involve all the parties that have either directly or indirectly involved themselves in the Syrian conflict. We also spent time talking about Ukraine. There is a Minsk agreement that arose out of the Normandy negotiations between Russia, Ukraine, France, and Germany, but it hasn't been implemented. And I've made very clear that until it is implemented, the United States is not going to pull down sanctions, that it is important for both sides to try to seize this opportunity in the coming weeks to finalize an agreement and to figure out a sequence in which that document is put into effect. And there was agreement not just between myself and Mr. Putin, but also with Chancellor Merkel and President Hollande, that effort should increase in urgency over the next several weeks. And so that was constructive but not conclusive. And we'll have to see whether we can actually get this done, or whether, in fact, President Putin, despite talking about wanting a negotiation as a solution, in fact, is comfortable with this constant low-grade conflict along the Russia-Ukraine border. And finally, we did talk about cybersecurity generally. I'm not going to comment on specific investigations that are still live and active, but I will tell you that we've had problems with cyber intrusions from Russia in the past, from other countries in the past. And look, we're moving into a new era here where a number of countries have significant capacities. And frankly, we got more capacity than anybody, both offensively and defensively. But our goal is not to suddenly in the cyber arena duplicate a cycle of escalation that we saw when it comes to other arms races in the past, but rather to start instituting some norms so that everybody's acting responsibly. We're going to have enough problems in the cyberspace with non-state actors who are engaging in theft and using the internet for all kinds of illicit practices and protecting our critical infrastructure and making sure that our financial systems are sound. And what we cannot do is have a situation in which suddenly this becomes the wild, wild west, where countries that have significant cyber capacity start engaging in competition, unhealthy competition or conflict through these means when, I think wisely we've put in place some norms when it comes to using other weapons. So that's been a topic of conversation with President Putin, as it has been with other countries. We've started to get some willingness on the part of a lot of countries around the world, including through our G20 process, to adopt these norms, but we've got to make sure that we're observing them. All right?